Welcome to MSL Stories. Friends, if you don't mind, please subscribe to my channel. I have a dream of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. Let's start the story. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to have a life-changing moment in a dull, quiet room, but there I was, sitting at my desk, surrounded by the faint hum of my computer and the steady drip of rain tapping against the window. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon, and my wife, Laura, was on yet another business trip. She had called me from her hotel, and we were chatting about the usual: work, travel, the mundane tasks I had to finish around the house before she returned. There was a sort of practiced rhythm to it, like the conversations we'd had 100 times before. Then the rhythm broke. "I've got to go, babe," Laura said abruptly, glancing off screen. "The kettle's boiling." She always managed to find small distractions. It was one of those harmless quirks that became part of the background noise of our marriage. "All right, love you," I replied. "Talk to you later." "Love you too," she echoed. She reached for the screen and the camera blinked off. The call ended, or at least it should have. Instead, there was a faint click, and the screen came back to life. The camera was off, but the microphone was still on. I didn't think much of it at first. I was about to close the window and get back to my day when I heard her voice again. Only now it wasn't directed at me. It was casual, almost careless, in a way she never sounded with me. "Tommy, I'm done with the call." My finger froze over the mouse. Tommy? There wasn't supposed to be a Tommy. There wasn't supposed to be anyone. It was like someone had dropped a bucket of ice over my head, but I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Instead, I listened. I let the moment stretch out, let the voices drift through the speakers, and then I started recording. I had no idea what would come next, but I wasn't going to miss a word of it. Their conversation flowed smoothly, like this wasn't the first time they had spoken this way. They reminisced about the night before, trading whispers and inside jokes that had nothing to do with the world I thought I shared with Laura. Then came the real kicker, the plans they were making for dinner that evening, right down to the kind of wine they'd order. I didn't hear just one betrayal that day. I heard dozens, layered on top of each other, spoken in soft tones as if the words were wrapped in velvet. But underneath that velvet, there was a blade, and it was cutting through every memory, every promise, every unspoken trust. I closed the laptop slowly, but my mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't know existed. All at once, it wasn't just Tommy. It was the other missed calls, the unreturned texts, the casual explanations for late nights at the office. How many other business trips had there been? How long had I been the only one in this marriage who didn't know? A part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand explanations and scream for answers. But I wasn't going to do that. There was no sense in letting rage dictate my next move. Instead, I decided I would keep my calm and I would take my time. The first thing I did was check the prenuptial agreement. We'd signed it 8 years ago, back when the idea of cheating seemed abstract and distant, something that happened to other people. There it was. Clear as day, infidelity voided any claim to joint assets. Perfect. Now I had a plan, and it was going to be thorough. The first night after the call, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, the events of the day replaying over and over in my mind. The calm I'd maintained in the moment had been a mask, and underneath it was a chaos that threatened to pull me under. But I knew that if I let it show, if I reacted too soon, I would lose any advantage I had. I wasn't about to give Laura or Tommy a chance to clean up their mess before I had laid out my trap. The next morning, I sat at my desk with a steaming cup of coffee, my laptop open and ready. I wasn't going to settle for a single recording as evidence. I wanted the kind of proof that could withstand any lie Laura might come up with. With a few keystrokes, I accessed Laura's email account. She'd never been particularly cautious with her passwords, and I had set up our home network myself. It was trivial to recover what I needed. Her inbox was an ordinary mess of work emails, newsletters, and automated reminders. But buried among the clutter were messages from an account I didn't recognize. Tommy's. I scrolled through their exchanges, which went back months, each one revealing a little more than the last. There were photos, little love notes, and even travel confirmations for weekend getaways I'd thought were conferences or client meetings. Every email, every photo was a nail in the coffin of what our marriage had once been. Then I dug deeper. I went through her cloud storage, her phone records, even her location history, things I could access without leaving a trace. By the end of the day, I had gathered more evidence than I needed to prove the affair, but I kept going. I wanted every last shred of proof, not because I needed it for the divorce, but because I needed it to understand just how far the betrayal had gone. I found more than I expected. Secret dinners, hidden gifts, even video chats while I'd been sitting in the other room. It was as if I were watching a twisted documentary of the last year of my life. For a moment, I let the bitterness rise. How had I been so blind? I had thought our marriage was solid. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but nothing that couldn't be explained by busy schedules and the stresses of work. Now I realized those explanations had been excuses, distractions to keep me from seeing what was right in front of me. But it was pointless to wallow in those thoughts. I turned my attention to the financials next. If I was going to end this marriage, I wanted to do it cleanly and on my terms. I had invested in a variety of ventures over the years, stocks, real estate, even some cryptocurrencies, and I knew Laura had a limited understanding of the financial side of things. I started to transfer assets strategically, moving money out of joint accounts and into accounts that were mine alone. I didn't touch anything that would raise immediate alarms, but I ensured that if it came to a legal battle, I would be well ahead. I also reached out to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one with a reputation for handling high-conflict divorces involving infidelity. We discussed the prenup in detail, ensuring it was ironclad, and there was no legal room for Laura to contest it. As it stood, she wouldn't get a cent of the marital assets, and I was going to make sure it stayed that way. Then there was Tommy. A little digging on him revealed that he was not some random fling. He was a senior executive at a rival tech company. He had his own life, his own wife even. The irony was that his wife, Natalie, seemed to have no clue about his double life. I thought about what she would do if she found out. I wondered if she too would choose calm over chaos, strategy over rage, but that was for her to decide. I was simply going to give her the information she needed. That night, I drafted an anonymous email. I attached several pieces of evidence, including photos and emails that left little room for doubt. I kept it simple. A few lines explaining that I thought she deserved to know what her husband was doing behind her back. I scheduled it to send in 3 days, just enough time for me to put a few more pieces into place. Next, I turned my focus to Laura's work. She was a marketing director at a major firm, a position she'd climbed to after years of dedication. I wasn't interested in costing her the job outright, at least, not yet. But I had contacts at her company, people I'd met through her over the years. I started to plant seeds, little rumors that could easily grow into full-blown office gossip. I framed it as concern, saying things like, "Laura's been traveling a lot lately. Everything okay?" And, "I heard she's been spending a lot of time with someone from another company." I didn't give any specifics. I didn't have to. By the end of the week, I had set everything in motion. Laura was due back home the following Monday, and she had no idea what was waiting for her. I had collected my evidence, prepared my finances, and even laid the groundwork for the rumors to spread. I wasn't just taking steps to end our marriage. I was preparing to dismantle every aspect of the life she had built behind my back. Now all I had to do was wait. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet anticipation. I went through the motions of everyday life, as if nothing had changed. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, I was calculating my next moves with the precision of a chess player planning 3 steps ahead. When Monday finally arrived, I was ready. Laura's flight landed late in the afternoon. I didn't pick her up from the airport. I didn't even text her to ask if she got in safely. I wanted her to feel the subtle shift, the quiet absence of my usual attentiveness. When she walked through the front door, there was no warm welcome, no embrace. Instead, she found her packed suitcase by the entrance and a slim stack of papers on the kitchen counter. "Michael, what's going on?" Her voice trembled with an unease that hadn't been there before. She looked from the suitcase to the papers, confusion quickly giving way to the first traces of panic. I watched her from across the room, letting the silence stretch for just a moment longer than was comfortable. "Those," I said, gesturing to the papers, "are the divorce papers." Laura froze, the color draining from her face. What? What are you talking about? Why are you—" I didn't give her time to finish the question. "I know about Tommy," I said it plainly, without a trace of anger. "And I know about all the other little secrets you've been keeping." Her eyes widened and she started to sputter, reaching for excuses like a drowning person grasping at driftwood. "Michael, it's not what you think. I can explain—" "You don't need to," I interrupted, my voice calm. "I've already seen the emails, heard the conversations. I know exactly what it is." I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up a USB drive. "It's all here if you'd like to refresh your memory." The look on her face was one of pure disbelief, a mix of shock and a hint of anger, as if I was the one who had wronged her. "You went through my things?" she accused, her voice rising. "It was remarkably easy," I replied, letting a small, cold smile touch my lips. "You should have been more careful." Laura's composure began to crumble. "Please, Michael, don't do this. We can work through this. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything." I cut her off with a raised hand. "Stop!" The word came out sharper than I intended, but it did the job. "We're not working through anything. This isn't a negotiation. The prenup is clear, and there's nothing to discuss." She stared at me, her eyes glistening with tears. I could see the gears turning in her mind, searching for some way to talk herself out of the situation. But there was no exit. I had made sure of that. "Think about what you're doing," she pleaded, her voice now tinged with desperation. "What will people say? Do you really want to throw away everything we've built?" "Throw away?" I echoed, allowing a hint of incredulity to creep into my tone. "You're the one who threw it away the moment you brought him into our lives." I pointed to the suitcase. "You'll find everything you need in there for a few nights. I've changed the locks, and you can come back later to get the rest of your things, after we've worked out a schedule." It wasn't just about throwing her out. That would have been too straightforward, too easy. I needed her to feel the weight of her actions, to know that every day from here on out was going to be shaped by the decisions I'd made without her. Once she was gone, I set the second part of my plan in motion. I made another call to my lawyer, instructing him to file the divorce papers the next morning. Then, I turned my attention back to Tommy. I had scheduled the anonymous email to his wife, Natalie, to be sent on Monday evening, just as Tommy and Laura would likely be in the middle of their damage control. The email contained not only the evidence of their affair, but also a detailed timeline that left little room for doubt. I had even included a brief note suggesting she check Tommy's recent hotel stays against his supposed work trips. The intent wasn't just to expose him. It was to create a storm he couldn't easily weather. Meanwhile, I made a few more strategic moves. I reached out to a couple of mutual acquaintances who worked at Laura's company. I kept the conversations vague, but dropped just enough hints to let the rumors catch fire. It didn't take much for word to start spreading that Laura had been involved with a high-ranking executive at a rival firm. In her world, even the appearance of a conflict of interest could be damaging. I didn't need to destroy her career. I just needed to tarnish her reputation enough to cause a few cracks. From there, I would let the natural gossip of corporate politics do the rest. For now, I remained patient. The pieces were in place, but I didn't intend to reveal my hand all at once. There was still more to do, more to set in motion. I knew the situation would unfold like a chain reaction, each step leading to the next with its own set of consequences. I was determined not to let anger cloud my judgment. Every move I made was calculated, deliberate. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about dismantling the lies that had been built behind my back, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for Laura or Tommy to hold on to. And I was going to make sure that when everything finally fell apart, they would have no idea what had hit them. The day after Laura's tearful exit, I got an email from my lawyer confirming that the divorce papers had been filed. I forwarded the confirmation to Laura with a brief note. No further discussion needed. I knew it would sting. There was no room for ambiguity now. This was a clean break, and I had no intention of looking back. As I drove home from the office that evening, I wondered if Tommy had received his own surprise yet. I hadn't heard from Natalie, but I wasn't expecting any direct response. The email I sent her was anonymous and detailed, but it didn't invite a reply. If she had confronted him, and I was sure she would have, then my work was already beginning to pay off. The next day, Laura sent me a barrage of messages, apologies, explanations, even desperate pleas for forgiveness. I skimmed through them with a detached curiosity, almost as if I were reading a stranger's story rather than my own. She insisted that the affair had been meaningless, a distraction from the stress of her career, and that it hadn't diminished what she felt for me. It was the kind of justification I expected, an attempt to diminish the betrayal to something forgivable. But forgiveness wasn't on the table. That night, I got a call from one of my contacts at Laura's company, a mutual friend named Jake, who worked in a different department. We weren't especially close, but we'd shared beers a few times over the years and had a cordial professional relationship. Jake had heard the rumors and called to give me a heads up. "Hey man, I don't know if you've heard, but there's some stuff going around about Laura," he said, his tone cautious. "People are saying she was involved with someone from a competitor. It's causing a bit of a stir." "I've heard," I replied, not giving anything away. "It's unfortunate, but I'm not surprised. Yeah, it's just things like this can get messy. I figured you should know in case it starts affecting her work. You know how people can be. Appreciate the heads up, Jake, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I'm handling it. The call confirmed what I had hoped. The whispers had begun to spread. I knew Laura would be feeling the pressure now, not only from me, but from her colleagues, and perhaps even from higher-ups. It wasn't an outright scandal, not yet, but the foundation was cracking. The very environment where she had thrived and built her career was starting to question her integrity. I could picture her trying to do damage control, explaining things away in half-truths and feigned misunderstandings. But that wouldn't save her. It would only draw more attention. The thing about rumors is that they have a life of their own, and once they're out there, trying to squash them only makes them spread faster. The following week, I got a call from Natalie. Her voice was shaky, a mix of anger and despair. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone accusatory. "Why did you send me that email?" I paused for a moment, choosing my words carefully. "I'm just someone who thought you deserved to know the truth," I said. "You don't need to know who I am. I'm not looking for anything from you. I just wanted you to have the facts. Do you know what you've done?" Her voice trembled with restrained fury. "You've ruined my life." I resisted the urge to correct her, to point out that it was her husband who had done that, not me. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I replied instead. "But I think you already knew something wasn't right. I just connected the dots for you." Natalie hung up without another word, but I knew this was far from over. Tommy's world would be crumbling now, and that was exactly what I had intended. He would be dealing with fallout at home, and if I played my cards right soon enough, he'd be facing professional consequences as well. A couple of days later, I received a tip-off from an anonymous email account. The message was simple but direct. "Tommy has been suspended pending investigation." I felt a surge of satisfaction as I read the words. The affair had not only cost him his marriage, but was now putting his career in jeopardy. Apparently, someone had anonymously shared his misconduct with his company's HR department, highlighting how his relationship with Laura potentially violated company policies regarding conflicts of interest. I didn't need to guess who that someone was. Meanwhile, Laura's situation at work continued to deteriorate. The rumors I had planted had blossomed into full-blown speculation, with people questioning whether she had used the affair to gain insider information for her company. It didn't help that her performance had suffered in the wake of the divorce filing. She was distracted, unfocused, and, according to Jake, struggling to keep up with her workload. It was only a matter of time before her bosses started asking uncomfortable questions. Eventually, I got another message from Jake. "Hey man, just thought you should know. Laura's been put on probation. They're keeping it quiet for now, but the word is she's one mistake away from losing her position." It was unfolding exactly as I had planned. With each move, I had pushed them both closer to the edge, and now they were teetering, struggling to hold on. The confrontation wasn't just a single explosive moment. It was a gradual, calculated unraveling. It wasn't about shouting matches or slam doors. It was about watching them lose control of the narrative they thought they had mastered. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. I took no pleasure in the pain I had caused, but I did find a certain satisfaction in knowing that justice, however unconventional, had been served. Laura and Tommy had played their game, and they had lost. The final phase was near, but I wasn't quite done yet. There were still a few more steps to take before everything came crashing down completely. With Laura's probation and Tommy's suspension in place, the groundwork had been laid for the final blow. There was no need for theatrics or grand gestures. Subtlety had worked well so far, and I intended to see it through to the end. First, I focused on Tommy. His suspension wasn't just a disciplinary action. It had opened the door to deeper scrutiny into his activities. I had one more card to play, an anonymous tip to the regulatory authorities about potential insider trading involving his company. The evidence I provided was circumstantial, but suggestive enough to warrant an investigation. It was information that connected his suspiciously timed stock trades to the periods surrounding his meetings with Laura, suggesting that he might have had access to non-public information. I didn't care whether he was actually guilty. I just wanted to keep him under the microscope and buried in legal fees. I imagined Tommy's world collapsing around him, trying to juggle an impending divorce, a career in free fall, and now, a potential legal battle. It wasn't about pushing him over the edge. It was about watching him hang there, dangling by a thread, knowing that no matter which way he turned, there was no way out. Laura, on the other hand, still had a bit of fight left in her. She continued sending messages, alternating between apologies, pleas, and attempts to justify her actions. I could tell she was trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage her career, to stop the rumor mill from grinding her reputation into dust. Her desperation was evident, but I gave her no responses, no reactions. Silence can be louder than words, and I wanted her to feel that absence acutely. The breaking point came when one of her key accounts, a major client she'd spent years nurturing, abruptly decided to transfer their business to another firm. I knew this because I'd reached out to the decision-maker in that company, a former colleague of mine who owed me a favor. I didn't explicitly tell him to drop Laura's firm. I simply mentioned that there were ongoing issues that might reflect poorly on any business associated with her. That was enough to tip the scales. Laura was now standing on the last thin ice, and I could feel it starting to crack beneath her feet. A few days later, I received a call from Jake, the mutual acquaintance who had kept me updated on her situation. He didn't have good news for her. "Laura was let go today," he said. "It wasn't a big scene. They gave her a chance to resign quietly, but I don't think anyone believes the official story." "Thanks for letting me know," I replied, not letting my voice betray any emotion. "I hope she lands on her feet." Jake hesitated. "Listen, Michael, I don't know everything that happened, but you're sure you're okay? You've been pretty composed through all this." "I'm fine, Jake," I assured him. "Some things you just have to let go of." But I wasn't letting go just yet. There was one final move to make, one that would be as much a lesson as it was a statement. I reached out to Laura directly for the first time since that day I handed her the divorce papers. The message was brief and without emotion. "You'll find the rest of your belongings in storage. The key and address are in the envelope at reception. Our financial settlement has been finalized, and you won't hear from me again." I took satisfaction in imagining her walking into that storage unit, finding not just her personal effects, but every little memento of our life together boxed up and sealed away, like artifacts in a museum of a marriage that no longer existed. Each box was labeled with impersonal precision: clothes, books, miscellaneous. There was no warmth in it, no nostalgia. I didn't leave anything behind that she could use to make me feel guilty. No shared memories that might make her think I regretted my decision. In the end, Laura was left with almost nothing from the life we had built together. The prenup ensured she couldn't touch any of the major assets. The rumors and scandal cost her the career she'd spent years cultivating. The only thing left for her was the realization that the world she'd tried to balance, our marriage, her affair, and her career, had collapsed like a house of cards, and I had been the one to pull out the foundation. I didn't relish her suffering, but I did find closure in knowing that she and Tommy had learned that actions have consequences. The life they had tried to build behind my back wasn't just ruined, it was shattered beyond repair. From what I heard, Tommy's wife had already filed for divorce, and the insider trading investigation was dragging on, putting his career in a prolonged state of limbo. As for Laura, the last I heard, she had moved to a different city, starting from scratch. With everything finally settled, I decided it was time for me to move on too. I sold the house and relocated to a new city where no one knew the details of what had happened. It wasn't about running away, it was about starting anew without the shadow of betrayal looming over me. In those final moments, as I stood in my empty house for the last time, I allowed myself one small indulgence. I took a deep breath and let the satisfaction of closure wash over me. There were no lingering questions, no second guessing. I had done what I needed to do, not out of anger, but out of a desire for justice. And then I walked out the door, closing it behind me without a single look back. In the months that followed, I found solace in the simple things: taking long walks, learning new hobbies, meeting new people. I didn't speak much about what had happened. There was no need to rehash the past. It had already served its purpose. I had exacted my revenge, but more importantly, I had found a way to rebuild without carrying the weight of resentment. As for Laura and Tommy, their paths faded into the background noise of distant lives I no longer had any connection to. Occasionally, I'd hear a mention of their names from someone back in my old circle, but it was always just a brief note, a fallen career, a scandal, a relocation. They were like echoes of a story that no longer belonged to me. Life, in its quiet, unassuming way, went on, and for the first time in a long while, I was content with where I was heading, away from the wreckage, towards something that was mine alone to shape. It was never about forgiveness or forgetting, it was about letting go. Thank you, friends.